Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman. You're about to make the jump from the dishonest mainstream media into free and independent thought from key thought leaders on the subjects of culture, causes, politics, and faith. Jim Lakely is our guest today. He is the Vice President and Director of Communications of the Heartland Institute. Before taking his current position at the organization, he covered technology, policy for Heartland. Jim was also a journalist for 16 years, including covering the White House and Congress for the Washington Times. The Heartland Institute is one of the world's leading free market think tanks based in suburban Chicago. Its mission since its founding in 1984 is to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to social and economic problems. Jim is also the co-host of Heartland's flagship podcast, In the Tank. Jim, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Reed, it's a pleasure.
When we first discussed you coming on the program, I just had this general idea that it would be a great idea to just generally talk about big tech and censorship, which is your area of expertise. And then all hell broke loose. We went to hell, and I'm not sure we have come back with everything that's going on. So I can't think of a better person to have, especially as we start a new year and as we start this podcast on the show, than you right now to talk about big tech and censorship. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on the podcast, and it's going to be a challenge for me to remain calm through the entirety of this interview, but I'll try my best for the benefit of your listeners.
Well, feel free to scream off camera if need be at any point in time. So let me, before we jump in too far along, I'm going to go ahead and start with a disclaimer, because we're going to be talking about a bunch of different things. And we're talking about some emotionally charged issues, and the whole purpose of Indie Thinker is to help us make informed decisions. So in order to do that, we kind of sometimes have to separate ourselves from how we think about things emotionally and start dealing in the realm of fact. So the reality is, and I don't want to speak for Jim, but I think I do, at least in this regard. What happened on January 6th was atrocious. It was monstrous. It was evil. The fact that a police officer was beaten to death, and even the fact that somebody who was trying to storm the Capitol was shot to death, are all horrible, horrible things. Nothing that we would ever advocate. And I'll speak for myself now. Donald Trump steps on his own messaging constantly. Twitter is not his friend anyway. And of course, we're seeing that for real, but it was never his friend in terms of allowing him unmitigated freedom to just be able to communicate any way that he wants to, just because he very often was not a well thought out speaker. Now, there maybe even be some merit to that, so we won't wade into those waters, but just suffice to say, what we want to talk about today is going to mainly, I think, circle around the idea of Trump's ban and big tech, just generally speaking, specifically what's taking place with Donald Trump. But we want to do so for a much broader reason. We want to do so because we believe that there are implications for what just took place for each and every one of us. That's black, white, red, yellow, left, right, center, whoever you are. This is a conversation that needs to be had, and we need to be having these conversations. So once again, it's really, really good that you were able to come on at this time and kind of talk about this with us. So that said, I want to talk to you about Trump's ban. And I just kind of want to get your take on it. So I'm going to read to you something, and then I'd like for you to respond to it if you could. So what I'm going to read to you is, this is a blog post, or at least the official statement that was released by Twitter for why Donald Trump was banned. Okay, so I'm sure you're familiar with it, but for the sake of our listeners, I want to go ahead and read the tweets that got him banned according to Twitter itself. So this is from Twitter. So on January 8th, 2021, President Donald J. Trump tweeted, "The 75,000 great American patriots who voted for me, America first, and make America great again, will have a giant voice long onto the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form." Shortly thereafter, the president tweeted, "To all of those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. Okay. So that is why he was banned. And then they go on to say this. Due to the ongoing tensions in the United States and an uptick in global conversation in regards to the people who violently stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021, these two tweets must be read in the context of broader events in the country. So I want to first of all talk about that assertion, that it should be read in broader context, and the ways in which the president's statements can be mobilized by different audiences. Then I want to talk to you about that statement, including to incite violence, as well as the context of the pattern of behavior from this account in recent weeks after assessing the language in these tweets against our glorification of violence policy. We have determined that these tweets are in violation of the glorification of violence policy, and the user @RealDonaldTrump should be immediately, permanently suspended from the service. Okay. I know I'm going to ask you to do something that may not be fair, but I'm going to ask you to put yourself in Twitter's shoes, at least from the perspective of their own assertion. Did Donald Trump break their policy?
I don't know. Can you read all that again? That was a lot to absorb. Yeah. In fact, we could probably spend the entire hour reading the entire terms of service of Twitter, which are completely incomprehensible by design.
So maybe not a fair question, but
right. But look, of all the things that Donald Trump has said on Twitter, that barely moves the needle. That might be a 2 on a 1 to 10 scale as far as getting close to the line of violating terms of service or saying something alarming or frankly dangerous. It's obvious that Twitter, it's kind of like getting an Oscar for a Lifetime Achievement Award, like Al Pacino, right? He got an Oscar, I think, for Son of a Woman.
No, that's Cuomo. Cuomo is Al Pacino.
That's right. That's right. And so, yeah, I think Trump basically got a Lifetime Achievement Award ban from Twitter. It's obvious that that the things that he had said there on Twitter are not even among the most alarming or quote unquote dangerous or unsafe things that Donald Trump's ever said on Twitter. It's because, I think they've wanted to do this for a long time. And, we are kind of on a knife's edge right now in this country with our nerves. And, so I'm not surprised by it at all, but it's actually not a very good thing when the president of the United States is banned from one of the largest social media platforms in the world, in which he has used it to communicate directly with the people. I think that's quite troubling.
Yeah. I'm going to be a little less fair than you with my next question, than you were with my next question. Do you think why do you think they banned him? Because it's hard for me to believe that they banned him because of the aggregate of bad tweets. I don't think that's why they banned him, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm being a little bit fishy there. But do you think that's sincerely why they banned him? Is that why?
Well, I don't think there's anything in those 2 tweets that they cited that's worth banning somebody for. So I think it's quite obvious that it's a Lifetime Achievement Award ban for Donald Trump. I mean, objectively, there's nothing in those 2 tweets, especially the second one. I mean, why even include that? I mean, he's not going to the inauguration. Oh God, ban him. I mean, come on. I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test, and it's frankly an insult to our intelligence.
Yeah, the reason, and so we know, not that changes what you just said, because it doesn't. There is of course, people on the left will say that there's this long-standing tradition of presidents going to an inauguration, and that's why this is troubling, because of the broader context of the fact that he's not endorsing this election, and that's what he's alluding to. But what would you say to this? Because here's my real question: is this a wink and a nod, a tip of the hat to those who are in charge now, to the Democratic Party, who have been on their case consistently? And this is probably a right-left thing, because we can get into Section 230 in a moment, but is this a way to get them off their back? Is this currying favor with them?
Currying favor with the Democrats that are ascending into power?
Yes.
Absolutely. It's quite obvious, and I think it's been stated almost overtly that, look, we don't need Trump anymore. Let's just get rid of him. And it would also obviously please those that are going to be chairing the committees, those who are going to be deciding whether Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996 should be applied, and how it should be applied. And if you want to curry favor with them, basically the most the biggest gift you could offer them with your hands out is Donald Trump basically nuked from space when it comes to when it comes to Twitter and all other. I mean, he's been banned from all of them. It's funny that he was banned from TikTok. Now, I'm not a big TikTok consumer, but I have my doubts that Donald Trump even had an account at TikTok. But just to be safe, he's also banned from TikTok and Snapchat and several apps I'd never heard of. So, it's comprehensive, and there's a reason for that, and it is to curry favor with those ascending into power who hate Donald Trump more than human beings should actually hate another person.
Yeah, good point. I'm a Christian conservative, and I think that that's probably an amen right there, even though you may not like him.
A woman as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you had to throw that one in there. I think it's clear. I want to say two things perhaps here. And of course, if you don't feel comfortable, because I know you're not an attorney and neither am I, so I'm not going to try to pretend to be one. But from what I've heard and from what I've studied, Brandenburg v. Ohio is the case to kind of look at here in terms of the incitement of violence. Okay, now I know Twitter and Facebook, because I can already hear people who may be listening to this podcast, and hopefully you'll continue to listen to it to the end, saying, well, they're a company and they can do what they want, but let's just kind of roll the tape back. We'll get to that in a minute and just say, well, let's just talk about it from a legal standpoint. In terms of just that incitement of violence idea, which is hopefully, and I think ideally, what Twitter is basing its policies on is certain strictures that we have in the United States about free speech. And you cannot incite violence. So that comes from our Constitution. It comes from the United States. But Brandenburg v. Ohio is a case in which shows very clearly that you must directly incite violence if you're going to be accused of inciting violence, which means you must call for violence. It is very clear from those two tweets that he did not do that. And it is very clear to me, too, that while he was using, in fairness, militant language when he had his public speech, because they're going to say broader context, broader context. So the broader context is that speech that he gave before the Capitol riot. It's very clear to me there, too, that he was not inciting violence there as well, because if you quote him fully, he says, go there peaceably. So in my mind, if we're going to talk about incitement of violence, let's even remove it from social media and just let's go take their Twitter terms and say broader context. There are a couple people who actually directly perhaps incited violence way more than Donald Trump. So, for instance, Chris Cuomo with who said protests have to be peaceful. Let's push aside the fact that they were protesting for two very different reasons, and let's just talk about the philosophies here. Saying protests don't have to be peaceful seems like almost a direct incitement of violence. And then you have Nicole Hannah-Jones on CBS telling the world that anybody with a rational mind can tell you that it's not right to destroy other people's property, but these are not rational times. So that's probably, in fairness to her, that's probably less than Cuomo's quote there. But it does, essentially she's saying, go destroy people's stuff because the cause is worthy. And so Donald Trump didn't even get anywhere close. And then you kind of jump into concerning those two quotes. And then you jump into the idea that like there's all sorts of other people on Twitter who probably should have been banned a long time ago who are human rights violators. I know everybody thinks Trump is a Nazi, but to date he's actually killed 0 Jews. So I'm just wondering, I know that's a little bit of a rant, but maybe I'm the one that needs to go off and scream. But I'm just wondering if you can kind of speak to that in terms of where do you situate yourself in terms of if you felt like his tweets incited violence?
Well, as you very well pointed out, there are much worse examples, in very contemporary examples of getting closer to inciting violence through speech. And as you mentioned, the law on this is pretty clear, or I should say, the legal hurdle it must be leaped to trigger legal trouble when it comes to inciting violence is quite high. It's higher than people think. It's certainly higher than our media thinks. Barack Obama, there's a long-standing use of martial rhetoric when it comes to our politics. I'm going to fight for you. We're going to fight. This is a war. The culture wars and all this stuff. Those things are used all the time. Actually, as you were talking, I was remembering, if you might remember, Sarah, was it? Yeah, Sarah Palin had a Facebook ad that had targets over districts in the state of Arizona. And when Gabby Giffords was shot by a lunatic who didn't even have a Facebook account, it was blamed. That shooting was blamed on because her district was targeted, right? So
Yeah.
little targets on a map on Facebook. Sarah Palin was blamed for her getting shot for stuff like that. So there's and Barack Obama used to say, you got to fight. If they punch you, you punch them back twice as hard. I mean, there are myriad examples of this all through our political life just in the last 10 years. And so the idea, it's funny. It seems like whenever somebody on the right uses routine martial language when it comes to politics, it's an incitement to violence. But when somebody who's not a Republican uses the same kind of language, it's fine. It's just fine. So there's a clear double standard here, I think, in our political and media culture. And if you read the president's speech at his rally, if you watch it, he said flat out, we are going to, I don't even think he said the word march. He might have said the word march, but he said, how Trump speaks. It's
Yeah.
his words sometimes don't connect, but he said, we're going to go down to the Capitol and we're going to protest peacefully and patriotically. He said that explicitly, those two words. He did not incite this riot, which I agree with you from the top of this podcast, was absolutely disgusting. And everybody who was in any way involved in illegal activity needs to be identified. And happily, these idiots film themselves committing crimes. So it makes it real easy on the cops now, even taking selfies with cops. So anybody who did anything illegal needs to be captured, arrested, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, because that should not be happening in the United States. It's actually a little less infrequent than we'd like to remember, but it cannot stand. You cannot have that and have a democracy and have an American culture that we've all known and grown up with.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So I mean, I think the real thing is that, like, I voted for Trump in full transparency. Of course, that's going to get me canceled now. But this is not a Trump thing. This is not a MAGA thing. There are other implications to this, and so now let's wade into the other implications, because so people who have Reddit posts for Trump are being banned, and I'll just be fully transparent. To be fair, I don't know. I couldn't keep up with everything that's being banned lately, so I don't know exactly what's being said in some of these places. But I'm just going through the laundry list here. So Reddit's banning people and community forums, and then of course the highest profile thing that's happened since then this is Parler was had a terms of service violation according to Apple, and they were kicked off the Apple Store. Then they were kicked off the Google Store, and then beyond that, I was thinking, well, probably people can still, if they've got Parler, they can still use it on their phone. But they made sure that didn't happen either, because then Amazon sent them a term of service violation and then shut them off in 24 hours, and so now their app is 100% unoperational because they no longer have a place to host it anymore. So it's hard to say that we're overreacting, or that there's legitimacy to this thing when we're starting to see some of the implications of what's taking place now in the aftermath of what happened to Trump. So it's hard for us even to come to this situation with an open mind and say, there's not more to what's going on here than just the fact that Trump is sometimes foolish in the way that he uses his rhetoric, because I think that's an objective truth too. But as equally as objective is there's some issues here about free speech that we have to wade into. So I guess I'm just wondering, in terms of implications, do you think we're right to and it's not conspiracy theory, or it's not overreacting to say, well, they're coming for Trump and then they came for Parler, and guess who they're coming for next?
Sometimes you're not paranoid. They really are out to get you. And I think the idea, I think what we've learned over the last, basically all through 2020 up until now, is that there doesn't seem to be any principled or limiting principle when it comes to basically suppressing speech or going after people on the right and canceling their accounts, because the justifications are thin. If you think they're going to stop, I think it's unhealthy, and you're kidding yourself if you think, well, first they were shadow banning us, but they'll stop doing that, or it'll just stop at that. Oh, now they're canceling all of these people. Well, maybe it'll stop at that. You can't sit around thinking that you're hoping it's going to stop. I mean, this is a semi truck of a freedom crushing semi truck coming right at you, and you can't just keep standing there hoping that it's going to stop. You have to do something. You either have to get out of the way, or you have to, you got to do something. It's going to run you over. If it isn't today, it'll be tomorrow. What's interesting about Parler is that, yes, Amazon Web Services, AWS, which is a big sponsor of the NFL, by the way, they're everywhere. They're one of the most, in fact,
they're the number one provider.
Yeah, Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Twitter, those combined are some of the largest and most powerful corporations in the history of human civilization. Amazon is what, is it a $10 billion company now? It was only like 2 or 3 years ago that I think Apple was the first company to have a $1 billion valuation. And now all of them have 1 billion or more. And so when these powerful corporations that are really unaccountable, they're more powerful than our government is. I think you can prove that pretty easily, that the government seems to be afraid of these companies because they're not going to regulate them. And that can happen to you. If they can cancel Donald Trump, they can cancel other people as well. But the thing about Parler, and so the justification, taking the Parler app off of their app stores, and then subsequently, so you'd be able to use Parler on your web browser, or if you had it on your phone before they took it away, you could I presume you could still use it on your phone. But we never got to test that because immediately Amazon took Parler right off of its servers, for which they paid. And why? Because these companies, encouraged, frankly, by the Democrats who were lying, or didn't know. Let's just be honest about this. They didn't know. It was too soon to know. But we now know. I think as this was accurate, at least as of yesterday. Do you know how many people that they've arrested at the Capitol Hill riots had Parler accounts?
Yeah. I was going to ask you about this.
Zero many. That's how many. But Parler was nuked from space by Amazon Web Services because supposedly Parler was being used to organize that riot.
Yes.
You know where that riot was actually organized? Facebook. Facebook was probably the most common way for these people to communicate and get together. In fact, Antifa has been using Facebook for years to organize at least all of last year, to organize all of the riots they have carried out all through the summer in cities all across America. But Facebook doesn't suffer any ill effects to this. But Parler, which just happens to be the number one competitor to Twitter, which just happens to be the only social media app where free speech is actually, where they say we're not going to ban people for what they say. We're going to allow you to say what you want and let the people figure it out, which used to be something we called the American way, which used to be trusting people to figure things out on their own and treating people like adults. So all of that is why Parler got destroyed. And it's really nothing else other than that, because the justifications that these extremely powerful companies used to destroy them turned out actually not to be true.
Yeah. So, all right. So I got to read this because this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. In that same post that Twitter made about their reason for canceling Trump and then their assessment of it, this is what they actually said. I thought this was very interesting. They, in their determination, they say that it's based upon a couple of factors. The very last factor that it was based upon is this: plans for future armed protests have already begun proliferating. And then here's the key: on and off Twitter. So in that, they acknowledge the fact that Twitter was used to do the very thing that they're accusing Parler of doing.
Exactly. And so, so when I said earlier that you can't be too paranoid because it turns out these things end up being true, when the justification for destroying Parler, utterly destroying it in the matter of 20 hours, it was a Thanos snap.
Yeah.
And so, when these things happen, you keep saying, well, it can't get any worse. My friends think of me as kind of cynical. It's like, here's the secret, guys. It can always get worse, and
Yeah.
it almost always gets worse.
So you're an optimistic cynic. It could always be worse.
But again, just thinking about this, to kind of tie this into the justifications for all of these speech bans and the canceling of people and shaming of people and all of this stuff is because if you were to ask Facebook and Twitter and big tech what they're interested in, and it is protecting us. It's making sure that we're safe. These are safety decisions. We're talking about words.
Yeah.
And we now live in a society in which there's a blog I read a lot called Ace of Spades HQ, and the proprietor of that, Ace, he's written this a lot actually lately in the last couple of months, but he says that I think this is brilliant. Conservative speech is violence, and left-wing violence is speech. So if you say something, just words are violence. And so we have to protect you because, your safety is at risk if you hear something that you don't like or offends you. Yet riots in the streets, setting, cars and buildings on fire, beating almost to death elderly store owners trying to protect their businesses from being utterly destroyed by Antifa and BLM rioters. All of that is just, according to our media betters, speech. This is the voice of the unheard. Yet, if you just want to speak on social media and you say something that the left doesn't like, you are lucky if you're just canceled, because worse can come.
Yeah. Well, this is so here's the implications part, just to kind of tie it together. The implications part is, one, this is a free speech issue. Now, again, people can say, well, they are just free market actors acting on the free market, and they can make this decision. However, you already spoke to the fact that some of these companies are bigger than countries. You think about Amazon being a $10 billion company. They make more money than multiple nations put together. And they certainly have a ton of power. Which is where I gotta bring this up. I want to talk about the free market in just a moment, and that assertion that this is just a free market decision, and they're entitled to make that as a free market company, as a free market actor. But let's just talk about their power, kind of on a large scale. So, based upon what Twitter just did specifically, the Ugandans are up for an election, and they've talked about stopping Twitter from being used in the country by internet service providers. And ironically, I agree with it. I can't be original here because I agree with everybody who's spoken to this. The irony of this thing is just absolutely hysterical, and these people are so stupid that they cannot see themselves any longer because they're so self-righteous. But here is Twitter's tweet about Uganda saying this company's too powerful and they can influence our elections adversely, so we don't want them interfering with what we're doing. So here's this tweet from Twitter in response. Ahead of the Ugandan election, we're hearing reports that internet service providers are being ordered to block social media and messaging apps. We strongly condemn internet shutdowns. They are hugely harmful, violate basic human rights and the principles of #open internet. Now, the obvious irony here is the Hunter Biden stuff and the fact that they shut down every source of information that they could try to get their hands on around that story leading up to our election. But Ugandans, to their credit, are not stupid, and they realize that that Twitter is a threat to them, or at least they think they are. So I think that kind of at least speaks to, whether or not it puts to rest, who knows, but at least speaks to the idea that these companies are very, very powerful, and that they understand their power and their power on free speech. So the second thing I want to just ask you about is the free market question. All right. So I maybe this is conjecture on your part, but still, I want you to feel free to kind of just talk about what you know, and what you've experienced and studied about this question. Do you believe, and maybe I should say, is there any doubt in your mind that what actually took place with the banning of Parler is monopolistic collusion, which means that these guys are not acting as good-hearted, free-spirited, free market actors, that they're actually working together. The tech bros are working together to do what I think is a scary thing, to quash a small business that's actually competing with them. And not only competing, was beating them in terms of being number one on the App Store. And then you may say something about this, but I got to squeeze this in here. The fact that Jack Dorsey, as soon as Parler was banned, takes a screenshot of his app being now number one on the list where Parler once was, now that they've totally gotten rid of Parler. So in your mind, is monopolistic collusion something that is taking place among Amazon, Google, Twitter, Facebook?
Yeah, I don't believe in coincidences.
Yeah.
Not coincidences that strong. It was obvious collusion, and it's really whether they had lunch together with masks on and 17 feet apart and just passed notes and texted each other to tell them we're going to do this at this scheduled time is irrelevant. The thing about Silicon Valley is that it's completely dominated by leftist groupthink. They literally, this is, again, it goes back a little bit to the idea of conservative speech makes me feel unsafe.
Yeah.
They literally don't interact with people that disagree with them in any meaningful way. And in fact, we over the last several years, I think pretty much all through the Trump presidency, people on the right have felt more and more marginalized and more afraid to actually say what they believe in public places, like, where you can be identified, like your job. It's become dangerous to say you support President Trump, to say that you think he's been a good president, to express conservative and libertarian ideas, because it is against, especially if you're in Silicon Valley, you're against, you're going very much against the grain. It's a groupthink mentality. So whether or not they actively colluded with each other, the fact that all of them basically smashed Parler at the same time and crushed it. It was like literally 12 hours before they were alive and kicking and doing well. 12 hours later, they are completely obliterated. That is not, that was on purpose. And it was coordinated either by, a mob mentality of the big tech people, or, they all kind of knew they were going to do it. They had to do it. And I think they were basically waiting for the coast to be clear, as we discussed earlier in here. It's like, are they doing this to curry favor with the Democrats? That's part of it. But the other part of it is that they don't fear Trump anymore. They don't fear any backlash or any ramifications for this grave abuse of their immense power over people's ability to communicate freely. The thing is, these companies, especially the social media giants, exist only because of special exemptions in the law that they have been granted by the federal government. And we'll get into that maybe a little more detail later, but that is the so-called Section 230. They would not be able to exist without the Section 230 freeing them from any liability for what people use or what people say on their platforms, right? And so if they didn't have that, if they were held liable for everything anybody might say on their platform, they would, you can't have that. The business plan doesn't work. But that is only if they become an open platform and have, good faith, reasonable terms of service on, and really only police speech when it is egregiously bad, when it does actually get over the hurdle of actually inciting violence. But they've not done that now. They've become publishers, so they get to enjoy being a publisher and also enjoy never being sued by anyone for what's said on their thing, as if they're a platform. They're having it both ways, and they really need to just pick one. Just one more thing I just wanted to say on this issue. You're talking about like the free market, and where's the market in this? And I've heard a lot of arguments that this is, look, this is just the free market at work. I guess a company can choose to crush Parler if it wants to. A company can decide to not
just go somewhere else.
Store. Yeah, they can go somewhere else. It's funny. It's like, for so long they said, conservatives, you don't like Twitter, go make your own Twitter. Well, somebody did. And then what happens? The big left, big tech companies crush it. It's like, we did the really hard thing. We built our own Twitter, and now you destroy it like a Thanos snap. It's gone. And so we now live in a world where, talking about the markets and the rights of corporations or people to do and run their businesses as they see fit. We live in a world where a Christian baker in Colorado is told, you got to bake that damn cake. It doesn't matter what objections you have, you got to bake that damn cake. And we also live in the same world where the biggest, most powerful corporations in the world are not told to post that damn tweet. they're allowed to make decisions based on their own values, but a small baker in Colorado cannot.
Yeah.
This is, you know, so a small baker in Colorado is a public accommodation and has to take all comers. But for something much more important and much more widespread, Twitter and Facebook and Google do not have to be a public accommodation for speech, and especially political speech. And it's so bad that they got away with crushing and banning the oldest newspaper in the country, the New York Post, reporting a factual story that was going to harm Joe Biden. Again, you think about, is this coincidence? Are they really adhering to their terms of service? No, they're not. They were rigging the communications about this election in favor of their favored candidate, because Hunter Biden's story was going to hurt Joe Biden. So they did what they could do. They crushed it. They destroyed it. They took it off. People didn't know about it. You know, you and I do, because we are conservatives and we travel in conservative circles and we read conservative blogs and we follow conservative people on Twitter and other social media. So we knew about that story, but the vast majority of the public did not. And it might have affected their vote, but we'll never know because they didn't know.
Well, we'll be back with our guest in just a moment, but now it's time for a segment in our show that we call Inconceivable.
Inconceivable.
Inconceivable, of course, is a segment in the show where we look at current events that do not make sense, or at least just current events, and we try to make sense of them. So today, I would like to give you my take on Wonder Woman 1984. Now, it may be a little bit late in the game to call Wonder Woman 1984 a new movie, but I felt like it was time for a little bit of levity in the podcast, so let's jump into it. So what can I say about Wonder Woman 1984? It is colorful. So it's not a very good comic book movie, in my opinion. It's not very entertaining, and it's really the stupidest, unfunny comic book movie I think I've ever seen. And I like Gal Gadot; she did fantastic in it. And I like the other actors, Pedro Pascal and Kristen Wiig. But I think they were a little bit wasted in the roles that they had on screen. But here's why. Armand White, writing in the National Review, said, Hollywood liberals are in a tizzy because their frustrations about losing and winning overwhelm their judgment and greed. That's the clear lesson of Wonder Woman 1984, a sequel to the 2017 DC Comics origin story of the Amazonian superhero played by Gal Gadot. She battles a TV-fixated businessman named Maxwell Lord, who is played by Pedro Pascal. Now, you'll know Pedro Pascal because he is Mando. He's the Mandalorian. So, Maxwell Lord wants to rule the world by feeding into everyone's selfish desires, including that of the President of the United States. Lord, making use of his prehistoric phallic stone that grants wishes. Now, when you first saw this, you probably didn't think about that, but this reviewer here, Armand White, points out the fact that this thing is shaped like a phallic symbol. But anyway, Jenkins and the team project their political fears onto the film's story through petty point making. And I think that's kind of the point here, is that that the film tries too hard to be political. And maybe this is the more important, broader point about what I want to try to communicate about this film. Political messaging in a film is not bad. In fact, concerning church, I'm a Christian, so I hear messages all the time. I don't mind politics and messages. A lot of people say, well, that message was too political. I don't really think what we mean was that it was too political. So I don't think this film is too political. When we say that it's too political, I think what we're actually saying is that it was too one-sided and not truthful. In my mind, we should mix politics and church as long as we don't break a cardinal rule. It has to be true. In the church especially, it should be. I don't even mind mixing politics that I disagree with and entertainment, but when it is done, it has to be done thoughtfully and accurately. What is done here is what is so often done by people on the left. They mistakenly place their agenda above the truth. Now, it happens on the right, to be sure, but we should universally agree that what happened at the Capitol, for instance, was wrong. And wrong is wrong. But we're going to have a harder time finding universal agreement about some of the violence, the burning of churches, and looting that took place over the summer, regardless of why it was done. So you can say what you want to about the justification based upon the point of it all, But the truth is, both were wrong. You don't burn down people's stuff. You don't attack people. So all of us have biases, and I know I may be making some generalities, but I also think the key to end tribalism is to take a page from the conservative Christian playbook, if I do say so. We don't always do it. We're not perfect, but truth is a value of the conservative Christian. For instance, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris say that there are two systems of justice in America based upon the repercussions of what took place this summer and the repercussions from this January 6th event, the evidence is just not in their favor. There were some brutal implications, not only the death of people, including a police officer and an armed service member, but also over 52 arrests. There's no doubt that some of those people are going to get the book thrown at them for what they did. All of that stuff is incredibly loaded. So please don't miss the point of what I'm trying to actually communicate here. Yes, absolutely, we will be wrong from time to time. But which is subservient? Is the truth always in service to the cause? And if the truth doesn't serve the cause, do we toss it to the side? When our cause doesn't line up with the truth, do we drop the cause? If the truth means more to you than how it makes you feel, then I want to welcome you to the Republican Party. Okay, don't get offended. That's just a joke. But if you were offended by that joke, welcome to the Democratic Party. That was just a joke too. Regardless of where we find ourselves today. And I know I'm making a broader point than just this movie. Jesus said the truth will make you free. Sincerely, I hope we're coming upon a new season of unity and prosperity in America. I really do. But I know something. If we place truth before party and ideology, it won't matter who's in office. It will destroy our tribalism, and it will help our nation. Well, that's all I have to say about Wonder Woman 1984. I hope that was helpful in ways to you guys, even beyond just a simple movie review. So that's why I decided to go into a little bit of a lengthier review concerning these issues that I think are so important to us as Americans, as people, and as seekers of truth. All right, now back to our guest. Should we ban 230? So let me kind of set that question up. And if you can, kind of explain 230 for our audience too. So before I set the question up, can you explain 230 for us?
Yeah, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. It was put in place, and it basically created social media. It made it, and it's not just for social media like Facebook and Twitter and places like that. I think it was actually originally 1996 was a long time ago in tech terms. It might as well have been the 1950s when it comes to technology compared to today. But for instance, if you run a blog and you get 3,000 comments on it in a day, and then somebody who does a name search for themselves sees that somebody in the comments said something, that they consider libel, and so they can sue you now because you allowed it on your website. The federal government made it so that it basically, they said it's not reasonable for the owner of a blog to be responsible for everything somebody might say in the comments underneath that blog post. In the same regard, Twitter and Facebook and Parler, for that matter, cannot be held responsible. They can't possibly monitor 3 billion tweets a day and make sure that all of these things are meeting legal muster. It would be impossible to operate in that way. So they instituted Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to clear the liability danger for people that are serving as platforms of speech online. Right. And so you may publish your blog, but you're giving a platform for the comments underneath, yeah. And you may be, and Twitter and Facebook are platforms for others to communicate with each other. And so that was the intent, so that let people just communicate. That's what social media was supposed to be about. But and this is key. This is where everything changed as far as we are concerned in the way human beings interacted on social media was the 2016 election. You might remember Breitbart had a story. They had somehow gotten their hands on video of a meeting at Google right after the 2016 election, and Sergey Brin and a couple other leaders were there in this auditorium, and the employees sitting in the auditorium were almost in tears, and they vowed that we're never going to let this happen again. How did we let this happen? Actually, it was what the theme of the meeting was. How could we let this happen? And so it was from that moment when Donald Trump got elected, Silicon Valley decided we are never going to let this happen again. And so that's why all of this restriction on free speech, all of this heavy-handed abuse of their power that we've seen ramped up really hard near the end of the election. And now it continues to this day. They figure, well, we got away with it. Let's just keep doing it. let's really make the world in the way we want it to be. And we could use our power to do that. They really think they're making the world better. They're actually making the world a lot worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I think that's undeniable. That kind of takes us on a different road that I don't want to go down. But yeah, I mean, I really wonder, like, jeez, wouldn't we be better off if it didn't even exist? I think, objectively speaking, if you're a man or woman of conscience, I hope you're wrestling. If you're a CEO or creator of Facebook and Twitter, I hope you wrestle with that question as to whether or not our world is better off with these places. So, I'll let the experts ultimately decide that question. But so here's the real question, going back to Section 230. Should it be repealed? I get nervous that both Democrats and Republicans are agreeing about something, because it so rarely happens, that it makes me think, I'll just be totally honest with you, and Democrats are not going to like this. I view in my head, this is the way this is going. The Democrats are saying we need to ban Section 230, and then the Republicans are saying, yeah, we do, and they're saying, yeah, because these tech bros and this, and this, and then the Republicans are like, yeah, well, we think that too, so let's get rid of them. Yeah, let's get rid of them. Yes, we should definitely get rid of them. And then basically the Democrats are leading them down the primrose path just to continue to do their bidding, because ultimately I think that there is an end game goal. Here's some conspiracy theory for you. An end game goal with the Democratic Party and social media, and that they have designs for them. And I'll dig into that in a minute. But ultimately, should we ban Section 230? Is that the route that we should go in order to try to eliminate some of what is happening right now? So where, for instance, right now, they can do whatever they want, and they will never get sued. They can say whatever they want. They can proliferate any kind of posts, whatever they want, and they can platform people and deplatform people whenever they want, and they will never have to reap the consequences of it because they will never be sued. Now, the vast majority of companies in America will tell you one of the biggest things that they have to deal with, constantly having lawyers on retainer, is being sued. So CNN and MSNBC, if I'm not mistaken, just recently got sued because of the Covington boy case.
I'm glad he's got generational wealth now for the rest of his life.
Yes, thank you, Chris Cuomo. It's the best thing you've ever done in your life. But anyway, so that happened, and it keeps them accountable. So I can understand why there may be some reason to ban 230, but I also am a little bit concerned with the fact that Democrats want to do it too.
Well, here's I mean, in full disclosure, the Heartland Institute has worked with our friends at the Media Research Center, which I think a lot of your viewers and listeners may have heard of, in a coalition, and we've talked about these issues actually for the last several years on what to do. In fact, Heartland's Facebook page, leading up to I'm looking at the chart right here. I keep it in here. Leading up to the 2016 election, we had numbers that are going along just like this on our influence and all that stuff, and it cratered right in the summer before the 2016 election. Yeah. So I have the evidence right up here on my wall that shows that these kind of shenanigans are not a new phenomenon. They've been happening for a long time. And look, I've signed coalition letters that say repeal Section 230. I was actually an early advocate for not actually repealing Section 230, but saying that that might scare them, and that might scare them straight, right? Make them. So my position on this, it's a very difficult question. It's kind of tricky, but I think it can be simplified. How about we try enforcing Section 230? You tell Twitter and you tell Facebook, look, your business, you are a platform. You claim to be a platform, which means you get Section 230 exemptions. If you are going to continue to operate as a publisher instead of a platform, that is no longer going to apply to you. So in many ways, you don't even have to do anything to the law. You just have to have a Justice Department or, to enforce the law. You have to have somebody to sue, perhaps, and saying that my speech rights have been violated and that this company here is violating the letter of the law of Section 230. And let's just see how that goes. That would be actually a lot less intrusive than repealing the law, because that causes a lot of other problems. We have a structure in place. We had a structure in place. Let's try enforcing that structure, which is what, those were the rules of the road. To get that Section 230 exemption that applies to your company, you have to be acting in good faith. If you don't think we have enough evidence to show that these big social media companies are not acting in good faith when it comes to conservative speech, then, I don't know maybe you're watching too much CNN if you believe that. But you know, I've done tech policy for the Heartland Institute for more than a decade. And, you know, I was there, you know, I remember when they came out with the iPad, and all the experts in the tech world said, well, iPad, why would anyone need that? I got my phone and I got my laptop. I don't need anything in between, you know, so
Yeah.
technology just advances so quickly. And, you know, you don't think things that are coming along are all that revolutionary, but they end up being that way. Social media was one of those things that was just kind of fun. You know, it was just a thing to share pictures of your grandkids and stuff like that. And it's become this very different and powerful thing. It's become the public square for the entire world. That's an amazing accomplishment, but it's only that way if they have 230 protection. It's only that way if they act in good faith. And, you know, I want to go, what's wrong with going back to the way the internet was in 2012? What's wrong with going back to those rules? Those rules served us very well. And the reason we can't go back to those rules is because of Donald Trump, because the Silicon Valley said, we're never going to let this happen again. And, you know, they can't continue to live and operate as if it's 2010 or 2008 anymore, and carry out these speech crushing policies that they have and keep 230. So let's try enforcing Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And if they violate it, then you take that, you know, maybe you nuke them from space because they're actually violating the law.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of wonder about the future here, to be totally honest with you, about whether or not, I think what you're saying makes a whole lot of sense, but I can't help but wonder if that's not going to be the path, because now there's probably some grievance on the right, and then there's certainly a invested interest on the left. So this is kind of what I've been wondering about, is that it seems that the right and the left are saying the same, or they're asking for the same thing, but saying two different things. So they're asking for 230 to be removed, but they're saying two different things. So the right is saying, we don't want you controlling our speech. And the left is saying, we want to control your speech. I mean, it's undeniable that that the left is in control of the mainstream news media. This is an objective fact, so this is not personal opinion. 90% of the news coverage leans to the left in mainstream circles. So anything that's on broadcast news, on television, 90% of that coverage all leans left. So it's very clear to see the Democrats have a friend in the mainstream news media. The place that I believe that and this may sound incredibly cynical, but I just got to tell you what I think. The one place that they believe that they have a friend in, but they want to make sure that they have a friend in, is in social media, because what has happened in this generation is that still vast majority, about 60% people watch mainstream news media outlets to get their information. But guess what's happened? 40% and ever increasing people are getting their news exclusively from social media. That is too much of a liability for the left to let them operate without their say-so.
Yeah. And, you know, what I said earlier, like, you know, things are going to get worse. They're always going to get worse. And things are getting worse in this regard. Yeah. So not only does the left control the mainstream media, which they have for a long time, we just didn't really see it. You know, when you had Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather and Peter Jennings, you know, talking to you, you didn't really notice that it was all left, because there was no other options. There was no other alternative. But, you know, as we've actually, I think, have made very clear, that the Silicon Valley is controlled by the left too. And I actually think the leftists that control Silicon Valley and all of our digital communications are even more radically left than people at CNN and MSNBC. And the principle at play here again is free speech. You'd be hard pressed to find a principled conservative like yourself or me, or a principled conservative or libertarian think tank anywhere, that advocates for suppressing the speech of the people that disagree with them. It's just not in the DNA of people on the right to reflexively tell people to shut up. That the answer, there used to be an American maxim that the answer to speech you don't like is more speech. But the left doesn't have that as a value anymore. They used to. They're not. That's a liberal, classic liberal value. The left doesn't have that classic liberal value anymore. Their value is about power.
From the ACLU of all places, where they would say, I may disagree with what you say, but I will fight for your right to say it.
Right. And they don't believe that anymore. The saying should be changed to, I don't believe in your right to speak, and I will, I will die on that hill to make sure you can't. That should be that's the new slogan of the left. And, so this is, it's not like both sides do it or both sides are interested in punishing the other side in the same way. It's just not true, because they have
Yeah.
different aims. The right just wants to be heard. They want to be left alone. They want to be treated like adults online. They want to be able to speak. And I just want to, as an example of this, so I think, to go all the way back to the beginning of this podcast, you were reading the tweets that Donald Trump had supposedly got him banned from Twitter. And I think one of the concerns was that obviously he was saying that the election was stolen, that he was the rightful winner. I was actually laughing at it. He kept tweeting that day after day, I won. It was a landslide. It wasn't even enough that he won. He had to tell everybody on Twitter it was a landslide. I mean, come on, I thought that was funny. I think most adults think it's funny and don't think it's a threat to the country to have him say that. But maybe, that's just me. But, part of the reason that Trump was banned, because they didn't want him talking about the election being stolen from him anymore. That's a myth. It's a lie, that all the concerns he had they've all been debunked. I'd like to see the debunking. I haven't seen any. It's just been stated. But here's a tweet that in that line, along those lines, is very, very dangerous. Quote, "Our election was hijacked. There is no question. Congress has a duty to hashtag protect our democracy and hashtag follow the facts." That tweet was posted by Nancy Pelosi on May 17th, 2017. If you or I or Donald Trump tweeted that, he would be banned, you would be banned, I would be banned. And in fact, that tweet to this day is still on Twitter.
Yeah, if you told that to somebody on the street and you said, who said this, they would say, Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. That's right. It was not Donald Trump. It was Nancy Pelosi. So that's just one of a billion examples of the unequal and unfair treatment by these tech oligarchs. And it's obvious that they have a rooting interest in their side and leftism being ascendant and freedom and conservatism being crushed.
Well, we've gone over a lot of stuff today, a lot of information that I hope is just thoughtful and engaging for people. I know it is for me to just kind of contemplate this stuff and to think about the implications, not just say whether we agree or disagree, but let's just really let's move away from our tribes for a minute and let's rationally think about, what does this mean? So with that being said, this story is ever growing and it's certainly not over. So what are some things that maybe we haven't discussed today that need to be on our radar, or maybe some things that we should be looking out for in the future as these things kind of evolve?
I think you're going to see, what I think is going to be interesting to look at is to really, what is the future of social media? When Parler was eliminated, when Trump was banned from Twitter, all sorts of prominent conservatives suddenly noticed that they had 15,000 fewer followers, or they had 25,000 fewer followers. Molly Hemingway, who's a fantastic journalist at the Federalist, I think she lost 50,000 followers overnight.
Wow.
Now, part of that is because of maybe bots being purged, and part of it is like people leaving Twitter. It's going to be interesting. The promise of social media was that it was going to be this global town hall, and where you could hear and listen to and speak to so many different people and hear lots of different viewpoints. But yet here we are, where I think basically social media is going to become its own little closed garden. People call Parler the conservative Twitter. It was only the conservative Twitter in the respect that they respected free speech. Right. It wasn't that they only let conservatives on Parler. Anybody could get a Parler account. The left could go over there and take it over. They could speak more than conservatives and see how that works out for you. So, it's going to be interesting to see if does America calm down when people are going to be leaving social media. I know a lot of people, and I think you hinted about this earlier, a lot of people are going to start thinking about making decisions that they didn't think they were going to really need to make just two months ago. Do I want to give Amazon any more of my money?
Yeah.
Do I want to have a Twitter account? Do I really need Facebook? I think you're going to see, and in fact, the stock market even bears this out. Twitter stock plunged. I think they lost, I think the social media giants combined lost $5 billion in valuation overnight when they banned Trump. And I would actually like to see that continue, because I think money talks and, BS walks. And I think if more people walk away from these things because of the unfairness of it, that would be a good thing for the country. I think maybe we are getting to the point where we're realizing how oversaturated we are with digital media. I'm thinking about it a lot. I know that people that I know and love are thinking about it a lot. That's what I'm going to be looking for. I'm going to be looking to see if this absolutely unfair treatment by the big tech giants, that's obviously partisan, whether that's going to actually bring about a change in the way people think about these devices they have in their hands and why and how they use them.
Yeah. And I still can't but help but wonder. And I know this is pure conjecture, but I got to ask, do you think the big tech bros wrestle with their conscience and wonder about whether or not their creations have made our world a better place?
I hope they do. I hope they do. I hope they think about that every day. I think they, Google's motto used to be, at least, what was it? Don't do evil.
Yeah.
Right. And I would hope that the tech bros would start to think about these things and have wrestling matches in their conscience about what is actually going on and what policies they are implementing and what effect it has on real human beings. And then I remember that big tech has bowed and bent the knee to China and will basically help the communist Chinese government suppress its own people for money. That Apple gets its iPhones made by slave labor in China. So when you put all those facts together, you start to think maybe they don't think about these things. Because if they did, maybe they wouldn't. These other things, they wouldn't be helping China suppress its own people. But they do. They do help China suppress their own people. If they're going to do that to them, why would they think about the rest of us? Why would they think of Americans as really any different, and we should be treated any differently? Because they certainly haven't shown it. Not this year.
No doubt about that. Well, so what should we do? Because I struggle with this. I honestly think the world would be a better place without it. But then there's benefits to it too. I mean, I'm just starting a podcast and I'm thankful for the opportunity to let people know about it on social media. And then I also think, hey, we can't cede this important ground to the left. And if all Republicans leave these social media platforms, that we're giving perhaps we're giving the Twitter, Facebook, and these other places exactly what they want. I don't know. So, what do you think is the best policy moving forward for individuals in terms of their usage of social media based upon what's going on?
Wow. I know that I'm just so exhausted. 2020 was so exhausting. This election was so exhausting. The post-election madness is so exhausting. I feel less urged to pick up my phone and read anything like I used to, just because I'm just too exhausted. Maybe I'll rest up and by summer everything will be back to normal. I don't know, but I think people need to rethink what they do and why they do it. Technology just became easier and kind of fun and just becomes a part of your life. And before you know it, I guess it's kind of like addiction. Before you know it, you used to just have a few beers after work, and then, you look up 5 years later and you're an alcoholic and you don't know how that happened. It happened slowly. And I think our addiction to digital devices has kind of happened slowly. And you can free yourself from it though. You can turn that phone off.
Yeah.
You can, if you don't want to cancel your Twitter account, make a resolution to not even look at Twitter for a week, then see how 2 weeks goes. That'd be nice. But I think people would probably, and this would be a much healthier conversation if social media, which is supposed to be a free speech platform, was actually a free speech platform.
Yeah.
But like the march through the institutions of the left, I was thinking about this because you said, what should we do? It's like, I think a lot of conservatives just probably just want to walk away. It's like, I want to, as I just advocated, right? I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to do it. I'm done. I'm not doing Facebook
Right.
anymore. I'm not going to complain about it. I'm not going to make it stink. Let them have it. You know what? The conservatives did that about our education system. And now that's dominated by the left. They did that about the higher education system. And now that's dominated by the left. They did that in Hollywood. And now Hollywood is dominated by the left. And so, the option is either, I guess, fight or walk away. And it depends on how important you think the future of communication in America is.
Yeah.
And so after convincing myself 20 seconds ago that I wanted to walk away, I think I don't. I think I want to turn around, walk into the fire and fight back so that, true American principles are applied to some of the most important things certainly in our political life, which is the ability to communicate and to learn and to read. And if it's controlled entirely by the left, that's a pretty scary place.
Beautifully put. I couldn't have put it better myself, and I think 100% right on. That's a good place to even for us to just kind of stop so that we can contemplate that about what our next step is going to be, and whether or not we think that the path of least resistance will lead to the right conclusion, as it typically never does. I know it hasn't for the Christian conservative circles who now bemoan the fact that prayer and Bibles have been taken out of schools. But they actually did nothing about it when it was going on, and it is the way it is now. And so we essentially are eating the fruit of our labors. And so I want us to think about that as we kind of address this issue too. So Jim, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate you and everything you guys are doing at Heartland. So I know we can catch the podcast. What's some other ways that we can stay informed about maybe this issue as far as you guys are concerned, or any other issues that are coming out?
Well, I do, and I don't want to tell you to follow us on social media, but you can follow the Heartland Institute at Heartland Institute, or I'm sorry, at Heartland Inst on socialist Twitter. We also are on Facebook, Heartland Institute, pretty easy to find. You can go to heartland.org, which is our website. You know, it is pretty hard to communicate and to live without having the digital world a big part of your life, certainly for an organization. But I would continue to visit heartland.org. You can find information on freedom and liberty and all the things that we're doing in all sorts of different areas of life to try to advance free markets and liberty, and to beat back smaller government, or beat back big government and those infringements on your freedom and liberty.
Yeah, well, you guys are doing some great work. I love everything that you're doing. So those who are listening, go check out In the Tank podcast, and stay up to date on heartland.org with different things that are happening in our world. God bless you, Jim. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Reed, it was a true pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Our thanks again to our guests for being on the show today. Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman was brought to you by our sponsors. If you like what you heard today, please do us a big favor and give it a 5-star review, and like it and share it with friends. And if you want to hear more awesome guests, make sure to check out past episodes. Indie Thinker is a nonprofit paid for by our sponsors and the generous gifts of people like you. In order to hear more great guests like you did today, please consider giving a tax-deductible gift by going to indiethinker.org. And just remember, your voice matters, but infinitely more when you think for yourself.